house. And if you've been with us, thanks for joining us. Let's get real.
Let's get bold. All right, are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are they ready? I don't know.
It's about to get a little triggering today.
If you don't want to get triggered, you don't like conspiracy, don't watch the video.
What were you listening to recently?
Some video from the Leo King about reptilians, and I don't even know how I feel about that concept.
Well, that's him talking about the darkness.
Right.
So,
but the way he was talking about it on this one, about how it's not even like the energy of a reptilian, it's more of like AI.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that. Because AI is corrupt and the government's corrupt and the government's the one producing AI. So
but what is a reptilian?
It's so they say, I don't know the whole thing about it, but they say that in like the whole Atlantis thing, that there's light beings or Pleiades, and then there's reptilians. The reptilians are the bad energy.
Oh, like the shadow interference.
Yeah, I just think
type.
like the dark energy.
Okay, see, this is a good segue to one of the things that we want to talk about.
So let's just start there and we'll do the intro.
Yeah, because I didn't know we were gonna just jump into this, but this right here is a perfect example of what I want to talk about social media and the spiritual community. Okay, not that there's anything wrong with people using different words to describe different things and different concepts, but this is the problem right here, is that sometimes there's so many, because we live in an infinite universe, right? So there's literally an infinite number of ways to describe something, right? Because words are limiting.
And also the mind is your perception, so it also just depends on what your energy is when you're listening to something and how you perceive it, right?
And the context behind it. And that's the thing that I feel like it. Not only is it a problem with social media, but it's a problem with we need to be mindful of when we're looking at content and consuming, because we're literally programming ourselves, whatever we do, whatever we eat, whatever we watch. And it's not a bad thing when people are sharing these things, but it's just that sometimes when people describe things in a certain way, they don't give the context behind what they're even explaining, and then it causes confusion and bad programming.
Well, and again, moderation, right? Because if you're doing anything in excess, you're going to get consumed by it and you're going to be disconnected from yourself. And then that's going to create a problem within itself. So it's, again, where are you coming from when you're listening to stuff? Where are you coming from when you're engaging in social media? I think it all goes back to who you are as a person and what you stand for. Again, like we talked about last week, our values, your integrity. So if you're just getting on social media and you're scrolling mindlessly, yeah, if something like reptilians come up, you're going to go into like probably like what's going on, or in another aspect, like how my mom behaves is like fight or flight, fear. So where are you coming from?
And that's a good point too, because if you are scrolling, then that means that you're engaging in a coping mechanism and that you're on there to escape something, which is that something is a part of yourself that you're not wanting to face. And I hate to say that because I know it's a hard pill to swallow, but we all do it all day long. Our life is a projection and a consumption at the end of the day.
So let's talk about this, because actually now that you're saying this, it's like what we were talking about last week, and why this topic has come up for us this week is, I think, I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure Sara, because we kind of discussed this a little bit, is the vulnerability that's been coming up with all the intensities of everything going on and the triggers that we all have felt.
Yes.
Even no matter how much work you do, the triggers we all have felt, whether it's in relationships, job, our own personal growth. And I think some of the coping mechanisms we do have and we continue to have, and I mean, we could talk about social media, we could talk about AI becoming a thing. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if we don't get right with ourselves and get right with God and faith, like triggering could be a real issue, right? And it could either be triggering to change for the better, or it could be triggering to go down the wrong path.
Yes.
Right, the resistance you were talking about.
And we're prolonging the inevitable anyways, because with these energies that are coming up that we're going to be talking about shortly, we're not going to have any control. They're going to come up. So if we don't face them now, it's only going to just hit us like a brick wall.
That doesn't sound fun.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. But it's just one of the hard pills to swallow of life, and this being a infinite soul that chose to come in here in a limited human body that feels pain and experiences the whole spectrum of the sensory experience, from emotion to physical pain and mental, all of that. So I think we should, because that was a lot. We should pull a card right now to kind kind of just see what kind of guidance does Spirit have right now based on the energies that are going on right now.
And energetically, maybe even sharing, I mean, our own experiences. I don't know, like, this past week has been rough for me. Like,
God forbid we don't give the dogs attention for a second.
Well, and it's always funny because the dogs are always a signal, right? It's like chaos. Things have been very chaotic. I was even telling Sara, sometimes I don't even know who I am, which day I'm waking up, and what I'm feeling. But there's been, my own personal experience has been a lot of triggering. So that's been coming up, and within relationships, within my own personal growth, and seeing things about myself that in the past, right, again, because we have that Capricorn and Pluto, it's not a bad thing, but it is showing me parts of myself that I used to be like or carry, and how I can really not let those triggers affect me, but maybe allow me to change and grow from that experience instead of be resistant to it.
Being open, exactly.
Yeah.
Because triggers are not a bad thing. Do they feel good? No. But they're ultimately there for a reason, to shake us up and bring something to the surface and give us a message of, hey, something's not in alignment. Look at me. And the things that we don't want to look at, although the feeling may be very, very intense, uncomfortable, all the things make us feel like we're suffering. Once we do look at it and actually go through it, then that's why they say hindsight is 20/20, because then when we look back and we're like, oh, that wasn't so bad, that wasn't so scary, we just had to get through it.
Oh.
But if we let it pile up, it gets bigger and bigger and louder and louder.
And it's never really about the past experience. Most of the time, we're not even reliving those experiences in the way that they happened, because the way our minds work, and they don't remember things accurately. It's just the feelings that we had that have been suppressed that need to be released. So finding outlets like either taking time for yourself, meditating, community stuff. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do. Going in nature, like self-reflection. You were saying, like,
That
a lot more alone time.
That actually matches one of the cards here. It says, spend time alone in nature, meditating about your desires and intentions. Ask the angels to help you gain a positive perspective. The outlets, like you were mentioning, very important. I feel like it is important for us to be doing things that we need to be doing to keep us busy, not as a distraction, but more so to get more connected with ourselves and bring us joy and be more heart-centered. Because at the end of the day, if we're not doing those things, then it's going to be draining our life force energy.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, I want to go back to, like, the coping mechanism thing, because coping mechanisms are not just things that you do. Meaning, it's not just, overindulging on food or alcohol or I don't know, like it's
Smoking, social media scrolling, right?
Right. It's not just that. It can even be as subtle as thinking, a thought loop. So we want to be mindful of that as well, because if we're sitting, how can I'm trying to think of how I can explain this, because it's like, it can be something very subtle to where this is why meditating and sitting alone with yourself is important, because you're not distracting, you're actually feeling. Mm-hmm. Now, there are going to be times where that is going to be very challenging, but this is what they don't talk about in the spiritual community, is that there's going to be certain points where you have to do that.
Well, yeah, because sometimes too, it's not even about the emotional state. It's about the things that you're doing aren't working. So you need a different plan of action. You need different principles set in place. And something as simple as that, we don't even think about this. I was listening to a guy talk yesterday, Stan Tacken, who I love. He talks a lot about relationship stuff, but he said that if you don't get, and this is with relationships, the relationship with others, relationships with yourself, if you don't come back to the intention, and think about this, we do this in yoga class all the time, we do this in meditation, we do it before my sound baths, we always set an intention every time we meditate or go to a class. Why are we not setting intentions in our life? Why aren't we rechecking in and saying, okay, this plan isn't working, this principle isn't working in my life, how do I change that and have a different plan of action or a different intention? And I think that's this alone time right now.
I think we're giving our power away a lot too.
Yeah.
and in very subtle ways as well, like to the coping mechanisms, to the resistance. We're extremely powerful beings, so we have to have intentions. Now, are we able to walk around 100% of the time having an intention at all times and being aware at all times? No, that's not realistic. But that's something that we want to strive for as much as we can. Because, and I know you do hypnosis, and I think you had mentioned something in one of our other videos of how we walk around pretty much hypnotized most of the time. And when you're hypnotized and you're not having an intention, you've given up your power.
Well, and you don't have a plan of action because you're literally on autopilot every day.
Exactly. And so I'm glad that you use that word autopilot, because see, if you don't have an intention, you're walking around on autopilot, that means you've literally given up your power to the programs that you might not even know you even have.
Yeah.
And so sitting with yourself and facing some of those uncomfortable thoughts that aren't even you, right? That we so easily identify with, especially if they're like very painful. And then we start to feel like the emotions that are attached to those thoughts, like shame and guilt and all of those things. But those are some things that we have to be aware of. And that's why they call it practice. It's not as if, you do it and then it's like, oh, I got it, now I'm enlightened and then I'm done. One thing that I feel like I wish the spiritual community would talk about is the hard pills to swallow, so that people don't stay stuck and continuously seeking
or the
tools.
constant work. It's like, I think people think one day they're just going to sit back. It's like retirement. I hate that word, because it's like, and no judgment to anyone that's retired, but it's like, at what point are you going to just stop working, right, and enjoy life? No, you need to enjoy life now, because there's no guarantee of what's going to happen tomorrow. So I don't like the word retirement, because if you give up or you stop doing something, you've given up on life. You're not growing anymore. You're not reaching the goals and accomplishments. And that's the only reason we came here, is for that creating element. And that comes with doing things. It doesn't mean you have to work so hard, but there is that element involved. And I think that's another thing with the spiritual community. And I use that term loosely, because what is the spiritual community? But it's that, oh, we're all gonna just all go with the flow of things, which flow is wonderful. I'm all about that. But there is now this divine masculine energy that's coming back in, and it's saying you need to have a plan, you need to have structure. There needs to be hard work, because nothing that is worth value doesn't come with that. It doesn't come, you have to have the hard work behind it.
That's another thing that I feel is really not talked about at all.
The struggle of that, and there's nothing wrong with that struggle, because it gets you to see the things that you can get better at.
And that's why it's called inner work.
Yeah. Well, and even the outer work of like certain things too, right? When you sit with yourself, there's other things within your life you might want to change, like the way you're doing business, the relationships you have around you. So I think that's all things like they don't talk about. It's just the flow. Everything's easy. It's simple. We have a special guest here, Russ.
This is
you don't
my
like to
boy,
make
Russ.
anything simple, do you, Russ? You're in the masculine right now. We called in the masculine. We got divine Russ.
Russ is a Libra sun, Aquarius moon. I don't know what his rising is, because you have to have the birth time to calculate the rising. But I wouldn't be surprised if his rising was a water sign, or because he is loving. He has that water element to him. He is a little high strung because he's a terrier.
He's protective.
Don't start. Shit.
That's that masculine energy.
Yes.
So that's the protector.
I can't even put him down. He's leaning back. Okay.
Well, and in talking about that, you were talking about something about what is feeling, right? Like, what is feeling, and how do you define that in some of these things in our life, right, too? Because even in the spiritual community, there's like an aspect that you have to be loving, that you have to, disregard the negative and only focus on the positive. I'm guilty of that myself, like always thinking everything has to be good, and it it has to be loving and peaceful, and in reality, that's not the way things are. So, I mean, talking about that, like,
I think it's embracing the full spectrum of the human experience.
Right?
Now, is it easy? Hell no. Who wants to embrace suffering and pain and all the things that we don't like, But we can't just disregard it and bypass it and just ignore it. Well, because otherwise it's just going to get pushed down and pushed down, because we're vessels here. Our bodies hold everything.
Yeah.
Emotions, which is energy, and that's why we feel stagnant sometimes, because if we're just accumulating and we're not doing the inner work and we're not feeling it, then it accumulates, and then you get hit with that brick wall, like I mentioned earlier. The cosmos will sweep you, you know, if
The
you
carpet pulled from underneath your feet.
and that's
The
that's
tower
that Pluto
moment where
energy.
they're jumping out of the tower of fire.
I do want to mention though, the other cards that we got here is it's new romance is imminent, either with a newcomer or through reignited passion in your existing relationship. Be open to giving and receiving love. Now, this is not necessarily all about romantic relationships. This can also mean the relationship with yourself, because if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, because we basically are mirrors here in this reality, then we have a tendency to be attracting relationships, romantic relationships that we don't want. So I think that this applies collectively with people, with their relationship with
take it away.
themselves. And yes, some romantic relationships with others, because we did recently have a transit, an astrological transit that affected a lot of relationships. It was Pluto opposing Venus, which is the planet of love.
That was felt for sure.
Yep, and it definitely, there were a lot of breakups out there. A lot of clients that I had, they were like, "Is my ex gonna come back? You know, I haven't heard from them. You know, I had a breakup. What should I do? You know." So I think that's happening for a reason, because you know, there's if we don't have boundaries, which there is a Saturn transit. Saturn represents boundaries. And if there's boundaries that we've ignored and unconsciously, we didn't do it on purpose, because if we knew better, we would do better, right? Then it just accumulates, and then the relationships blow up. Let's go back. So you had talked about what does it mean to feel, right? So let's talk about that a little bit, because you mentioned, you know, I actually remember I had asked you this question. We had a conversation about it, and to me, feeling is like literally emotional, like crying, like feeling it, because I am a Cancer rising, so I'm very watery and sensitive. But you had mentioned you had someone that had a completely different experience of what feeling was.
Well, you have to remember that people don't feel the same way, right? It's based on childhood, and if we've never expressed emotion, right? We're not going to be able to cry maybe or get angry. Especially anger is a big one. So a lot of people that have suppressed anger, that's a hard emotion for them to feel. Why? Because anger has been looked at as a poor emotion, right? Even when we're talking about the things the spiritual community doesn't talk about, and just people in general, if you think about when someone gets angry, most of us don't like it. We cringe, we repress. Even sadness, a lot of times if someone cries, it can be uncomfortable for certain people, not everyone. So I think in that aspect, that's where I would say that people don't feel exactly the same. I think more logical people, they feel, but it's more thought process, where sure you can relate to this because we're Cancer risings. When I get emotional, it's like within my whole body, and I'm probably going to cry, scream, yell, or, you know, but that's just me. But that doesn't mean that's the way everyone else feels emotion.
So what I'm hearing you say is, because I feel like you're talking about two things now. I feel like you're talking about feeling, and I also feel like you're talking about expressing those feelings. So you're talking about feeling and expressing those feelings. And I feel like that's actually important, because if you don't express them, then you're repressing them. Wow, I should write that down. If you don't express, you repress.
But how are you expressing them, right? And we kind of, as human beings, we judge. It's just what we do, right? We're human. Nobody's perfect. And so, especially if you're in a partnership and your partner doesn't express this, or even a friendship the way you do, we tend to take it personally, but it's not. It's trying to look at the perspective of the other person, and a lot of times we don't know what that perspective is. So
and
that's
they
why,
might not either,
right,
in the heat of that emotion.
Right.
They have to be aware of what they're even feeling to be able to even make a conscious decision to express it in a healthy way.
Right, and they might
instead
not
of exploding.
and they might not express it in the same, like what you're saying. Explosion could be one way.
Passive aggressiveness, that's
Yes.
a very Cancerian trait.
Could be another way.
Mhm.
Some people think their feelings, right? So it's, as human beings, we're primitive at the end of the day, and I always say this, and this is why I'm a huge lover of Stan Tatkin's work, because he always talks about it. And he said the other day, at our best, we are going to be, we're going to hurt people, we're going to take advantage of people, we're jealous. That's just human nature. And if you say you're not, he always says, if you say you're not an asshole, you are disbelieving yourself, because we all are at the end of the day. We're an angel and a devil is what he says. So to know that and to realize that, is that, again, this goes back to the spiritual thing, is we are both aspects. We are dark and light. And you need one to have the other. You can't be selfless without being selfish. It just doesn't exist. It's the laws of the universe. So how can you embrace those parts of yourself? I guess people out there call it shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
I just call it the parts of ourselves. And how can you embrace those parts of yourself and use them to either better yourself or maybe also just understand other people around you? That's what I usually try to take those dark parts of myself as, or those maybe more angry parts of myself, is like, how can I see other people and understand their perspective and why they're going through what they're going through, because we're all human beings and we all have these emotions.
And I feel like that goes back to what you said about intention. That intention has to be there, or else this is what causes the conflict within your own self, and then in turn within other relationships.
Well, and the things we talked about in our last video, which was awesome because it was just a Q&A, but I went back over that video. I'm like, we had a lot of good points, because the one question that you had asked was, what do you value? And these are things, I think, some of the questions that we have stopped looking at, even in the process of going through our spiritual awakenings, is like, what do you value? And you said integrity. I said time, I think, and faith. And it's like, how are you incorporating those things into your life? And also, how are you understanding other people around you right now within that integrity, right?
And I think this is like the underlying energy amidst what we're even talking about here, that a lot of people can feel or be triggered by, is fear. Because to really get a grasp on what we're talking about is you have to be open to it, because it can be scary, because what it all boils down to is perspective. That's literally the underlying energy that we've been talking about basically this entire time, is perspective. Because if you have an intention, well, why do you have it? What's your perspective on it? What's someone else's value? What's their perspective? And it's ultimately the lens in which we all see and receive information through.
Yeah.
So then it boils down to, well, what are we talking about here? Well, what's the matter at hand here? So with that,
well, and also, how important to you is that matter at hand? Is it something that you necessarily need to fight for, or is it something maybe that can be set aside and it's not so important to get to where you're going, right? Like, not to say that not to have boundaries and not to respect yourself, but how much of your energy is worth putting into that, right? So
with that, we should talk about what's resistance. Because that's a big word that's been thrown around a lot, especially surrounding the discomfort and the triggers and all the things that we don't want to feel. I think we need to get clear on what resistance is. We can intellectualize it and understand the concept and feel like, oh yeah, I get it, I know what it means. But are you actually implementing it? And if you're not, well, why? And I'm guilty of this as well. I have a lot of mental energy in my chart, so I like to learn, I like to intellectualize, and then I think, oh yeah, I got it, okay, great, I'm doing the inner work. But that's really not the inner work. And then it hits me when I finally go through experiences of discomfort, and when I finally release the resistance, which sometimes I wonder if it's just God, because sometimes it's like time goes by and I'm resisting. If I don't know what it is, I'm not doing the work.
Well, and then look at it this way. As you're talking about this, I'm thinking about something I heard, which is incredible. Again, perspective. Where are you on your journey or your path? Where am I? Where are the people out there? What are we all going through? Think about getting in a car and you're going 90 miles an hour and you hit a brick wall. That resistance is going to be intense. But think about getting in a car and going 30 miles an hour and hitting that same brick wall. The resistance isn't going to be as bad. I mean, it's still going to hurt, but it's not going to be as intense.
It's a good analogy.
In that aspect, where are you at in your life so resistance, again, could be different for everyone, right? To someone, it could be so extreme, is kind of that analogy. To someone else that's maybe going that 30 miles an hour, it's not going to be the same.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like if you're watching this video, there's some part of you that wants to do the inner work, or at least is interested in inner work, especially if you feel like you haven't done it and you want to learn about it. There's obviously a part of you curious, right? So I don't, it's not, we don't want to put fear out there or anything like that. That's what's going to happen. But, it's really more so if you're consciously not doing the inner work,
Right.
and you're purposely resisting, then I feel like that those scenarios are more common.
Well, and there's going to be roadblocks in life. I think that's also sometimes, like you said, it was beautiful about God. It's like sometimes that's to redirect us, to keep us safe. The roadblocks are there to go and maybe say, okay, I can't go past this roadblock today, but let me try again tomorrow. And is that going to change? And that's where the trust comes in. It doesn't mean you give up. Maybe you keep going back to that roadblock, seeing it, and still showing up again. And then eventually, if it doesn't happen, then this is not the way to go. We talk about resistance, and everyone goes into freaking resistance mode.
Look at. Oh my God, I wish you could do a scene of like this one.
So let's talk about, we'll bring it back to ourselves a little bit. What do you feel like you've been resisting right now?
Ooh, I feel like I've been resisting some very old traumas from my childhood. Now, I've definitely released like the shame and the guilt around it, because that is something that sometimes we don't, well, not sometimes, we actually don't have control over what family we came into this lifetime with and what we went through, because we rely on our parents or our caregivers, whoever raised us, to take care of us for survival. So a lot of those things, I just come from a lot of very deep wounding, so a lot of it has been unconscious, and I've just kind of just been unraveling it over the years, like a yarn ball. So I feel like I've just definitely been resisting that a lot, because I've attracted a lot of relationships that weren't really in alignment with me. Granted, they were some really good people, but they just weren't in alignment with me at the time. And so I haven't really had much time to be alone to reflect, to face those emotions. And so I think that I've kind of unconsciously been resistant to that. What about you?
I feel like right now, it's interesting because I thought I was always so open to change, but recently there has been a lot of resistance to change. And I think because I thought change had to be on some big scale, but inwardly I've been going through a lot within my relationship, and I think it's because we are both changing so much, right? And when you're changing on your own, it's already hard enough, but then you involve a person in that relationship with you, whether it's a friendship, a family member, or a partnership, it becomes a little challenging, because now both of you are going through changes, and that affects your relationship and how that is going to change. So it's almost like having to revisit ourselves, and then revisit our relationship from a different perspective, and how we're going to set an intention moving forward for this relationship to continue to get stronger. And it's not always easy. There definitely has been some resistance there, and I think part of it is you either are going to rise to the occasion, right? And you're going to communicate. It's not about the things that have happened in the past. How are you going to move forward, and how are you going to set these principles and plans? And this can be with any relationship, friendships, and it doesn't mean you have to stay in something that's not serving you. But the one thing I do learn about relationships, or have learned, is that there's got to be some type of principle so people feel of value, they feel it's just, and they feel fair, because we're primitive at the end of the day. So we always go back to safety and security. It doesn't matter how much work you've done. So triggers, right? If you're in a relationship where you don't feel safe or secure, it's going to trigger you, and you're going to want to run.
Right. And safety and security can come in an infinite number of ways. Safety and security, by your physical safety, financial safety, emotional safety. I mean, there's just so many different facets when it comes to a relationship, and that's why the relationship with yourself is the most important, because if you can cultivate these things within yourself instead of looking externally, it'll be easier for you to detach and work out those conflicts, because conflicts are inevitable. You can have two people who are very, very conscious and have done a lot of inner work, but there's naturally going to be some conflict. So it's a matter of how do you work through those conflicts?
Yeah. Well, and I think conflicts in anything, whether this is a relationship with work or friendship or partnership or the relationship with yourself, it's like things have to get a little chaotic and shaken up for change to occur, because we get comfortable And I think to myself, if I'm just comfortable,
Autopilot.
right? We were talking about this. We together when we hang out, we get a little bit indulgent because I think we're comfortable with each other and we have fun.
And we love food, Cancer.
Yes.
The moon rules food in the stomach, so
And the
we are
whole-
all about food.
So it's like if we didn't have a little shake up in that, I would just stay indulging with you.
Right.
It'd be fun.
Exactly, because it's like, then that's the thing is, it's like, this is why we have the full spectrum of the human experience. Because if everything was just all good and butterflies and roses, life would just, that's all it would be.
Yeah, and we'd get bored.
Yeah.
Trust me, we get bored.
I think so too.
So let's talk a little bit about the South Nodes, because I know you said, Sarah, that this is pretty big. You said they're shifting. What are they? Where are they now, and what are they shifting into?
So right now they're in Taurus and Scorpio. The North Node's in Taurus, the South Node's in Scorpio. And they're about to shift into North Node in Aries, South Node in Libra next week on the 17th.
Ooh.
And the nodes stay in the signs for a year and a half, 18 months. And they're really big portals of energy that is felt collectively, and they bring themes that we feel for the year and a half that they're in the sign. So for example, right now, because they're in Taurus and Scorpio, a year and a half is a lot of time, right? So there's all kinds of energies that have played out, but some of the main things that I would say, issues with food, supply chain, earthquakes, natural disasters, whether that's Taurus, and it's been sitting next to Uranus, which is the planet. It's an electrical planet of shaking things up and shock. So that's some of the ways that this North Node has played out. Finances, because Taurus represents, it's ruled by Venus, so it represents value and money and resources, material possessions that bring us comfort and stability, because that's what Taurus loves and needs. The South Node is in Scorpio, and Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. It is the most intense sign of the zodiac, and so it also represents trauma, things that have been buried deep under the surface, so including our subconscious, secrets. So there's a lot of things that have been coming up to be revealed, not so great things, toxicities. It's a sign of purging, and so it's a water sign as well. But it also represents death and rebirth, because in order for us to rebirth, we have to have a death first. And so it doesn't really have a good rap, Scorpio, but those are some things that have been played out. Russ is on a roll today.
Well, and what I hear you saying is this death thing, right? This has been a big thing, and I think for most people, most of my clients that I hear too, is this almost, I know when Scorpio comes up, it's always death and rebirth, but this one feels like, I told you, some days I don't even know who the hell I am, right? And it's confusing, it's daunting, it's a little defeating sometimes. So I guess, is this something that is going to stay? Is the shifting of the nodes kind of going to help us move more into this new chapter? Because right now it kind of feels like there's confusion, and maybe people are feeling that out there, I don't know, but there's this like unknown factor, but
Yes.
not unknown in a way out there. It's almost like, okay,
Within yourself.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
I feel
Identity.
these new things happening, but there's an identity. Well,
So it's
Aries
actually
is
interesting,
identity, right?
and that's why it's
Self-
interesting that you say that, because see, when this is something that astrologers don't really talk about, that I see them mention, is that when we have these transits, it's not as if, oh, this transit's happening on this date, boom, this is it, this happened. And so it's all energy, right? So it's a merging and a blending and a transitioning and a tapering, right? So you mentioned identity. Aries is the sign of the self. It is a very self-aware sign. It is very motivated by what it wants when it wants it, because it's ruled by Mars, which is the god of war. It represents our primal instincts, which is something that we talked about earlier, based on survival.
Oh, wow.
And so we're actually going to be merging. You might already be feeling that energy. It's interesting, because Scorpio, when we have a death of self, a part of ourself, or going into a new chapter of our lives, there is that unknown, there is that confusion, there is like, I don't know who I am, because you haven't stepped into the rebirth yet. You haven't stepped into the new version of you yet. So it's like, oh, what is this? What am I? And so to answer your question, when the nodes shift, whatever plays out collectively as well as on everyone's individual experience, it's gonna be like a big shock. It's gonna be like a woof, because Aries is a fire sign. It's a cardinal sign, so it's very direct. Forward moving, it's like boom, pow, and so it's actually gonna be kind of good because it's gonna take us out of that a little bit. Depending on your journey, depending on your experience, the nodes are very fated karmic events, so some of it's out of our hands. So, this is why gratitude is a really important practice, because you're not promised anything tomorrow. Your life, your loved ones, your pets, your home, your job, and there are certain things that can play out that they're for our greater good. In the moment, it might not feel that great, but they're there for a reason to propel us into our highest good collectively.
So what I wanted to ask you then is if this is affecting us collectively, right? And there is this sense of death, and we're moving through all of these energies, and the Aries is the I am. I mean, to me, that means then if you have done the work, which I think people here that are watching are, right? And it's not a judgment for the people that aren't doing the work, but it's going to be this, because if Aries is very fiery, it could be very powerful in the sense of self too.
Yeah,
it's
an exciting sign.
Yeah.
And it is very powerful. It's a force. It represents your life force energy. Aries people, if you have an Aries sun, you've got a lot of energy. But yeah, it's an energy of excitement. So it needs something new all the time.
So is there something in this energy as the nodes shift, like an intention people can set for that, or something that they could maybe place their focus on with this shifting into the Aries of the I am?
Yeah, I think so. Depending on what house Aries rules in your own chart, if you pull up your chart and see, that'll give you a good idea of what area of your life it's playing out, and if you want to do that. If not, if you're new to astrology and you're not sure how to do that, I mean, you can still set an intention. Think about what energies of the area of life are very prominent in your life right now that you'd like to change, that you feel like, because I know there's this energy it's been going on for a while collectively, that change is imminent and that people want change. People are, haven't you come across clients where they're just feeling like, I just want change? And whether it be in an area of their career or their home or their relationship, they want change.
Well, I think you get to a point where stuff or shit isn't working anymore, right? And this is what I say to people when they say, okay, why can't that person change? Why can't my partner change? Why can't my mom change? You have to get to a place where you're almost in so much pain or sick of your own shit that change will happen. And that's, again, resistance. Levels of resistance, levels of intensity, levels of pain are different for each person.
Well, that's what this note's going to help with too, because Aries is a fire sign, and fire represents an energy of courage as well, and boldness. So I think that's also going to, these are some of the positive qualities that are going to come with this as well. So, because it's not all bad, it's also the higher expressions of these energies playing out as well. And so, just going back though, because to leave everyone with something, an intention they can set. If you don't have your chart, you don't know what area of life this is playing out, ask yourself, what area of life do you feel like you want change, or within yourself? Is there something that you've just been feeling for a while now that you're like, I really want to change this? And get clear on it. I would highly suggest not just willy-nilly, like, okay, what's the intention? I want to change this, because I feel like that's kind of not going to set you up for success. I feel like take a moment of quiet and really sit with it and feel the energy. What is it that you want to change? What do you feel like is stopping you? And if you feel that resistance come up of like, well, I've been really putting off launching a website, or, whatever the case may be, procrastinating on something, and you feel that resistance of like, oh, but I can't do it because XYZ, I have this going on. Sit with that and maybe make that your intention of, well, how can I push through that?
Yeah.
So I think just setting attention of what's the energy that you want to change right now.
Yeah, and a step further, even what you're talking about is feeling. How do you want to feel? once that change happens, because if you can focus on the how you want to feel, that kind of sets us up for that success. It's kind of putting yourself in a meditative state and maybe visualizing that feeling of, I want to change because I want more happiness, more freedom, more sense of peace, and focusing on that sometimes will help too with the change.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep, because it's all about that feeling, the vibration of that feeling that you're in. That's what you're going to end up attracting.
Let's get I was going to pull a little, this is the Soul Flower deck, and maybe just a little bit of action that we can take. Restoration. This is the lavender flower, which is super beautiful.
My favorite.
Yeah, and the smell of lavender, it's super calming, right? So maybe even setting a little bit of an intention with some lavender and like sitting in a meditative state. And again, it could be walking outside, you don't have to sit for meditation, but visualizing yourself. Restoration to me means too, like that next step, you're restoring, you're allowing yourself to rest and kind of rejuvenate before you go into this next story of your life, because I don't even think it's a chapter, it's like a whole new book. You're putting that other one on the shelf, and it's like you might even be burning it.
And give yourself the permission to do so.
Yeah.
Because with these nodes shifting into Aries, the energy is going to obviously pick up, heat up.
Well, and as we're talking about this, a lot of people have been calling me sick. They're not feeling well. They're run down. It's because they're not honoring that place, because this is talking about restorative and purifying energy, and using those aromas to kind of uplift your mind and body, easing feelings of stress, agitation from the earthly distractions, and rejuvenating your soul so that you can truly feel and radiate inner peace and harmony, which is beautiful. So it's like, if you are feeling sick, if you are feeling run down, yes, there is change. There is still that energy of forward movement, but again, that self-care, that compassion, because the value that you place on yourself is the value you're attracting in your life. So if you don't value yourself, self-care, your time, the people you're hanging out with, like that space, going inward, and if you're not valuing yourself, you can't attract what you want. So that's what I would say. Do we want to talk a little bit about the Blue Lotus?
I was just about to say, a lot of these cards have the color purple.
Of our Blue Lotus.
Yeah, and it's more like an indigo blue. Yeah.
Third eye.
Yes. So yeah, this definitely stimulates the third eye chakra. And
here, let's hold it up. So this is Egyptian Blue Lotus, and it helps with intuition. It's also for rest, for calming the nervous system. It's a wonderful tea that you can kind of drink in the evening. You can drink it before you meditate. I start small because I know some people can be sensitive, but it's not going to make you trip. It's not going to be like that. It's more of like a calming sensation. It kind of activates your pineal gland, and it's just going to give you more of that relaxed feeling. Like Sara was saying, it's purple. It's a very beautiful, they call it Blue Lotus, but it's almost more purple indigo, right?
Yeah, and the Egyptians used this in ancient Egyptian culture, so thousands of years ago, they used this because they actually call the pineal gland the seat of the soul. And it also brings a lot of euphoric qualities as well. So, but like Christina said, no hallucinogens, no tripping or anything like that. It doesn't get you high. But you do feel like a sense of euphoria and peace, and it actually calms the mind down, because your thoughts actually is like one of the main things that block your third eye. I know firsthand myself, because I have never really been one to really get visuals or anything like that, but I've noticed over the years of spiritual practice and calming my thoughts and drinking this, it's opening up my third eye, and I'm starting to get a little flashes of visuals. And I swear that I actually saw my own third eye. I actually stumbled across it online. There was this blue visual that I saw, and it had like a yellow ring around it and like white in the middle. And I don't even remember, I was doing a lot of studying one day, and I wasn't even like actively like searching it, but it was a synchronicity, because I accidentally like came across it, this article that literally said that's what the pineal gland actually looks like if you actually like get the vision of it. It's really weird, but I saw it and I just thought it was really interesting. But yeah, the Egyptians, they like to party with this. They infuse their wine with this. They literally infuse their wine and like let it sit like aged wine. And so I think the Egyptians did get high and trip, and I don't know what else they were doing, but that's not what we drink it for. But hey, listen, if that's what you want to do, then that's great, and open up your third eye in doing so.
Well, again, having that balance, right? I mean, doing what you feel you're called to do, but right now, how can you restore yourself? How can you purify some of the things within your body, within your space? Because I do think the more we can cleanse right now and the more we can connect to ourselves, like you said, go inward, the more it's going to set us up for the things we're wanting. And that also means when we are focused on the past, which I know the past is coming up a lot right now, and I'm not saying to just ignore your past, but it's the future. It's looking at the present moment and seeing yourself and feeling how you want to feel in the future that's going to let you get out of your own way and be able to start to create and, as they say, manifest what you want.
Well, the past informs the present.
Right.
And because we live in a dense physical world, the present right now is what we manifested in the past. And so that's why it's important to try to be as present as we possibly can, because we're manifesting right now. We're already
and you
manifesting
want your
our
present to
self.
be more in your future than in your past because of what you just said. This was awesome. The density of it. Joe Dispenza was talking about how when you think about density, it's the human experience, the matter that we are, that is heavy, and you carry
and
that.
slow.
And slow.
Mm-hmm.
When you can get into that state of feeling joy, of feeling, and this comes, right, meditation. I'm not saying that this is going to happen every day, but that's why it's important to get into that state in the morning or at night when you're in theta. You're going to be able to lighten that experience. You're going to be able to feel lighter. You're going to be able to feel less of a heaviness, more joy, more bliss, and that's what's going to help move you forward. That's what's going to connect you more to the present of that future self is already you, right? Like, whoever you want to be in your future, it's already who you truly are. It's the matter that we're carrying that's dense and heavy
and holding
of the
us
past
down.
that's holding us down.
It's just that's what the spiritual journey is an undoing and unlearning and basically cleansing what's all the things that we've accumulated and all the gunk and the blocks and all of that.
Yeah.
That's clouding our vision to stay in those feelings that we want to be in and that we want to magnetize. So,
well, this is awesome. I mean, I think we got hopefully you guys got a lot of insight from this. Anything else you want to add, or?
Why don't you try the Blue Lotus? You can get on Amazon. I'm not promoting this, but oh, by the way, I do want to say this. Amazon, it doesn't say Egyptian anymore. I don't know if it's an American thing, a censorship thing, or what, but it's still the same product. It's just they took the word Egyptian out. And if you look on the back, it actually says it's sourced from Thailand, which it's still legit because Blue Lily, it's also called Blue Lily.
And you want to make sure that you're bringing this up now. You want to spend a good amount on Blue Lilies. You don't want to buy something that's cheap because it probably will be more inauthentic.
Right, yeah, because it
maybe like $20 is probably like the average price. Would you say 20 to 25?
And you won't really get that much because it's legit and it's real. But I find that this brand is called Infini Vita. You get the most bang for your buck with this one.
All right, well, it's been fun with you all. We appreciate you spending your time with us.
The dogs are getting resistant.
Yeah,
so.
it's time. We gotta move and shake. We got things to do.
Hush your mouth.
But until next time, thank you all.
Thank you.